What happens when the darkness calls out to you, and you answer? She was a single mother, struggling to survive, when an alpha vampire stepped into her life and saved her from the unthinkable. But in the world of immortals, love comes at a deadly price. Join me as we dive into a forbidden love story where passion and danger collide. This is The Wolf's Curse. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Let's begin. The rain had been falling since morning, but by night it became something else. A storm that felt angry, almost personal. Grace Turner pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself as she walked through the empty streets. Her shoes were soaked, her hair stuck to her face, and her fingers were numb. But none of that hurt as much as her heart. Her whole world had fallen apart in one day. First came the phone call from work. "Grace, I'm sorry. We're letting people go. We have to let you go too." Then the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Final notice. Eviction in 7 days. And the worst part, her 6-year-old son Oliver had looked up at her with those round, hopeful eyes and said, "Mom, will everything be okay?" She had smiled. Right. Again. "Yes, baby. Everything will be okay." But everything was not okay. She had no job, no money, no family left to help her. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Every breath felt heavy. Every step felt like carrying the whole world. As she walked, she whispered to herself, "I'm tired. I'm so tired." The rain hid her tears, but her chest shook with every sob. The bridge stood ahead, long, empty, and cold. Hawthorne Bridge. People said it was haunted, but Grace didn't care. Tonight she wasn't afraid of ghosts. She was afraid of life. She walked until she reached the center of the bridge. The river below was dark and violent, waves crashing against the rocks like a warning. Grace stared down. Her knees felt weak. Her heart felt numb. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I've failed Oliver. I've failed myself." She stepped onto the ledge. The rain fell harder, almost like the sky was crying with her. She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, Oliver. Mom loves you so much." Her foot slipped forward. And then a voice cut through the storm like thunder. "Don't!" Grace gasped. Her eyes flew open. Standing behind her was a man, tall, dark, and impossibly still. His clothes were untouched by the rain. His skin was pale, almost glowing under the lightning. His eyes were the deepest, coldest blue she had ever seen. But before she could speak, her foot slid. Grace fell. She screamed as her body dropped toward the water, but she never hit it. A powerful hand grabbed her wrist. In one impossible motion, the man pulled her back up with strength no human should have. Grace crashed into his chest, trembling, gasping for air. He held her firmly, one hand on her waist, the other gripping her arm. For a moment, their faces were inches apart. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, not blue this time but silver. Grace froze. Who are you?" she whispered. The man stared at her like he was trying to read her soul. "Someone who does not appreciate wasted life," he said calmly. Grace's voice cracked. "I didn't ask to be saved." "I didn't ask to save you," he replied. His tone was cold but not unkind. More like he didn't understand why she would want to die. Grace pushed away from him clumsily, but her knees buckled. He caught her again. "You are shaking." "I'm fine," she whispered, even though she clearly wasn't. He looked at her like he didn't believe a single word. "You were about to throw away your life," he said. "That is not fine." Grace wiped her wet face. "Why do you care? You don't know me." "No," he said, studying her carefully. "But I know despair. And I know the sound of a breaking heart." His words made her chest tighten. She whispered, "Please, just let me go home." The man stepped back slowly, releasing her. But his eyes never left her face. "Then walk," he said. "And do not look back." Grace didn't know why, but she obeyed. She turned and began walking, her legs weak, her body cold. But the whole time she felt him watching. And she was right. Damien Cross, alpha vampire, ruler of the night, the creature feared by monsters themselves, stood on that bridge long after she left. His jaw clenched. His eyes glowed again. The scent of her sadness still lingered in the air, sharp and painful. He whispered to the rain. "Why did you call to me tonight, Grace Turner?" Grace reached her small, dim apartment an hour later. Her clothes were soaked, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the door. Inside, little Oliver slept on the old couch, clutching his teddy bear. He had waited for her. He always waited. Grace's heart broke all over again. She brushed his hair gently. "I'm here, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Oliver stirred but didn't wake. Grace changed into dry clothes, made a cup of weak tea, and sat at the kitchen table. She stared at the peeling walls, the broken light bulb flickering, the empty fridge humming in the corner. She felt hollow. Yet something kept replaying in her mind. The man's cold hand pulling her from death. The way he watched her like he saw everything she tried to hide. Who was he? She murmured. She thought maybe she imagined him. Maybe her mind created a hero in her final moment. But no. She remembered his voice too clearly. Too deep. Too calm. Too powerful. She shivered. Outside the apartment, unseen from her window, the man stood in the shadows below. Silent, unmoving, his eyes glowing faintly. Damien Cross had followed her home. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He simply watched. Inside, Grace held her teacup with shaking hands. Then the lights flickered again. She sighed. "Please don't go off, not tonight." The lights steadied, but a chill ran through her. She walked to the window and looked outside. Nothing. No one. Just darkness and rain. Grace closed the curtains. But Damien continued watching. His thoughts were colder than the storm around him. He could still hear her heartbeat. Soft, tired, breaking. He could hear the child's heartbeat too. Fast and small. And something inside him shifted. "She carries too much," he murmured to the night. "She bends but does not break." He turned as if to leave. But then he heard her sob softly inside the apartment. He froze. Another tear. Another sob. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. He was not meant to care. He was not meant to feel. Yet he stood there, unable to walk away. Inside, Grace buried her face in her hands. "Why is life so hard?" she whispered. "I'm trying. I really am." She didn't know that every word reached Damien's ears like a sharp blade. Minutes passed. Hours. Grace eventually fell asleep on the table, her head resting on her folded arms. When the storm calmed, Damien finally stepped away from the building, but not before whispering, "You should have someone watching over you." The next morning, sunlight entered the small apartment. Grace woke with a stiff neck and tired eyes. Oliver ran to her, hugging her tightly. "Mummy, you're awake." Grace forced a smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." But when she stood up, something strange caught her eye. A white envelope was pushed under the front door. Her heart skipped. She picked it up slowly, hands shaking. Inside were receipts, paid bills. Rent paid. Electricity paid. Water paid. And a note with no name. "You are not alone." Grace's breath caught. She looked toward the door as if the sender might still be standing there. "Who did this?" she whispered. Oliver tugged her shirt. "Mummy, are you okay?" Grace knelt and hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby. I'm okay." But inside she wasn't okay at all. She was confused, terrified, and strangely relieved. Outside, hidden from sight, Damien watched again. He whispered to the morning air, "Do not fear me, Grace. I do not help without reason." His eyes softened. His voice lowered. "And you? You are a reason I cannot explain." Grace couldn't shake the strange feeling that morning. The paid bills. The anonymous note. The memory of the man with the cold eyes on the bridge. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things. "No one follows you home, Grace. she whispered while packing Oliver's small school lunch. No one cares that much. But deep down something felt different. Unsettled. Oliver walked over, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Mummy, why are you whispering? Grace forced a smile. I'm just tired, baby. Now eat your breakfast. They sat together at their small table. The table Grace had found on the street last year and cleaned for hours to make it usable. She watched Oliver eat his cereal slowly, his legs swinging under the chair. He was all she had, all she lived for. And the thought of what she almost did last night made her stomach twist painfully. After walking Oliver to school, Grace returned home and nearly tripped. A large grocery bag sat right at her door. She froze. Slowly, she crouched and touched it. It was dry. Meaning it hadn't been there long. Who put this here? She whispered. Inside were things she rarely bought anymore because money was always tight. Bread, canned food, milk, fruits, even a small pack of Oliver's favorite cookies. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't luck. Someone was helping her. But who? Her heartbeat quickened. Is it him? She whispered. The man from the bridge. Those silver blue eyes. That strength. She shook her head. No, that's crazy. He didn't even give his name. But as she carried the groceries inside, she kept glancing out the window, almost expecting him to appear. And he did. Just not where she could see. Across the street, on a rooftop, Damien Cross watched her silently. His long black coat moved softly in the wind, his expression unreadable. He watched the way she looked around nervously, watched her hesitate before entering her apartment. He heard her whisper, I don't deserve this kindness. His jaw tightened. Humans were often greedy, selfish, loud. But Grace Turner was different. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't expect anything. She simply tried to survive. Damien didn't understand why he cared. Didn't understand this pull toward her. But he didn't leave. Inside, Grace sat on her couch, hands shaking slightly. Okay. Who would do this for me, she murmured. She thought of her co-workers. None of them knew where she lived. Her old friends. She had none left. Her parents were gone. She had no siblings. Then who? She closed her eyes. And the image of the man on the bridge flooded her mind again. His deep voice. His cold hands. His strange, glowing eyes. No, she whispered, shaking her head. People like him don't help strangers. But something in her heart whispered otherwise. All day, Grace kept feeling watched. Not in a scary way, but in a quiet, protective way. Like invisible eyes followed her every move. When Oliver came home, he noticed her mood immediately. Mummy, why are you acting weird? Grace blinked. Weird. I'm fine. Oliver tilted his head in that way only children could. You're acting like when you hide veggies in my spaghetti. Grace laughed softly for the first time that day. I'm just tired, sweetheart. That night, while Oliver slept, Grace sat near the window, staring out at the dark street. Who are you? She whispered. And outside, Damien answered from the shadows, so soft she could never hear. A man who shouldn't care but does. As the moon rose higher, his eyes glowed faintly. He could hear her heartbeat slow. He could hear her breathing soften. Only then, he forced himself to turn away. But before he left, he whispered to the wind. Sleep, Grace. I will not let anything harm you. And somewhere in her dreams, Grace felt safe. For the first time in a long time. The next night was colder. The wind crawled under the cracks of the apartment windows, and the street lamps flickered like dying fireflies. Grace put Oliver to bed early. He hugged his teddy tightly and whispered, Mummy, can you stay until I sleep? Grace brushed his hair. Yes, baby. I'm right here. When he finally drifted off, she kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and stepped into the living room. The moment she closed Oliver's door, she felt it. Presence. Pressure in the air. A wait, like someone stood just outside the apartment. Grace froze. Her heart quickened painfully. She swallowed and whispered, "Hello." Silence answered. But something inside her said she wasn't alone. Slowly, very slowly, she walked to the front door. Her fingers trembled as she touched the doorknob. She took a shaky breath. "Who's there?" Still no answer. She almost turned away. But then there was a soft, deep voice. A voice she couldn't forget. "Grace." She gasped and stepped back. That voice. That impossible voice. She unlocked the door with trembling hands and pulled it open. He was there. Damien. Standing perfectly still. Cold. Beautiful. His glowing blue eyes fixed on her like he had been waiting. Grace's breath caught. "You," she whispered. Damien dipped his head slightly, like he was greeting a queen. "May I come in?" Grace's lips parted. I don't know you." Damien's gaze didn't waver. "I know. Then why are you here?" "For you." Grace's heart skipped painfully. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you care about me?" Damien stepped closer, but not enough to scare her. Only enough for her to see his face clearly. Sharp jaw, pale skin, eyes too intense to be human. "You called to me that night," he said quietly. "Your pain reached me." Grace shook her head. "I didn't ask for help." "No," he said. "But you needed it." Grace felt her eyes burn with tears. "Was it you?" she whispered. "The groceries. The bills." Damien didn't deny it. "I do not like seeing you struggle." Grace pressed a hand to her mouth. "No one has helped me like this, ever." He tilted his head slightly. "That says more about them than you." She felt something warm in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. But fear quickly followed. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I have a child. I can't let strangers into my home." "Stranger?" Damien repeated softly. His eyes darkened. "Is that what I am to you?" Grace said nothing. Her heart beat too loudly. Damien stepped back a little, giving her space. "I give you my word. I mean you no harm." But his eyes weren't human. Nothing about him was. "Who are you, Damien?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze slid past her, toward Oliver's bedroom door. Grace's heart froze. "Don't," she warned, stepping in front of him. "Don't go near my son." Damien lifted his eyes to hers. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Curiosity. Maybe even admiration. "You protect him fiercely." "He's all I have." Damien's voice lowered deeper. "And you are alone." Grace swallowed hard. "Please answer me. Who are you?" Damien took a slow breath. "You would not believe me. Try me." A long silence passed between them. Then he said it. "I am not human." Grace's blood turned to ice. "What?" Damien's eyes glowed brighter, unmistakably unnatural. "I am vampire." Her breath left her body. Her knees nearly gave out. "The vampire," she whispered. "That's not real." Damien stepped fully into the light from the hallway, and for the first time, she saw him clearly. The too pale skin, the shadowy aura, the eyes that shifted from blue to silver, and the stillness, the kind only the dead possessed. "Believe me," he said quietly. "I wish it were not real." Grace backed away, fear gripping her throat. "You saved me, why?" she whispered. If you're a monster." Damien's jaw clenched. "I am many things, Grace. But I am not your enemy." Her breath shook. I don't understand." "You were ready to die," he said, eyes softening slightly. "And I could not allow it." Grace stared at him, confused, terrified, but also strangely safe. She whispered again. "Why me?" Damien stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough she could feel his cold presence. "I do not know," he admitted. "But when you cried on that bridge, it felt like your soul was calling mine." Grace felt tears slip down her face. I didn't want to die, she whispered brokenly. I was just tired. His voice softened, almost gentle. Yes, I know. Grace wiped her face quickly. I need you to leave. Damien didn't look offended. He simply nodded once. I will go. He turned, stepping back into the night, but paused at the door. But Grace, he said without looking at her. If anything threatens you, anything, call for me. She didn't answer. Couldn't. He walked out into the darkness. Grace closed the door slowly, pressing her back to it, sliding down until she sat on the floor. She whispered to herself in disbelief. I met a vampire, and he helped me. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from something else. Something she couldn't explain. Outside, Damien stood, listening to her heartbeat until it steadied. Then he disappeared into the night. But not far. Never far. Because something inside him had already chosen her. And he didn't know how to stop it. For the rest of the night, Grace barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. Damien, standing in her doorway. His strange glowing eyes watching her like he knew everything she felt. She kept whispering to herself. He's a vampire. He's a vampire, and he saved me? By morning, she wasn't sure if it had been a dream or madness. But when she woke up, she knew it had been real. Her body remembered the chill he brought with him. Her mind remembered the way he said her name. Her heart remembered the strange safety she felt. She made breakfast mechanically. Oliver ate happily, unaware of the war happening inside his mother's chest. After dropping him at school, Grace walked home slowly, hugging her sweater around her. She whispered. He said he heard my soul calling. What does that even mean? She reached her apartment door, froze, then gasped softly. A single red rose lay on her doormat. Fresh, dewy, fragrant, perfect. Grace bent and picked it up, feeling her heart race. No card, no message. But she knew. Only one person would leave something like this. She whispered his name. Damien. A chill ran across her skin. Not fear. Something deeper. Something dangerous. She carried the rose inside and set it gently on the table. She stared at it for long minutes. Why me? She whispered again. Why is he watching me? The answer came later that night. Oliver was asleep and the apartment was quiet. Grace sat on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the rose again. Then she felt it. That same presence. Soft, cold, heavy, like the air thickened. Her stomach tightened. She looked toward the window, nothing. But she knew he was close. Grace stood slowly, walked to the door and whispered. Damien, are you here? There was silence. Yes. She gasped and turned. He stepped out of the shadows at the far end of the hallway. He hadn't come from the stairs. He hadn't come from the elevator. He simply appeared. Grace pressed her hand to her chest. You can't just do that. You scared me. I did not mean to, he said softly. She swallowed hard. I told you to stay away. No, he corrected, stepping closer with slow, controlled grace. You said you needed me to leave. You did not say you wanted me gone. Grace's legs felt weak. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. And yet I am. Why? His eyes glowed faintly. Because something in me is drawn to you. Grace froze. Her breath caught. Drawn? How? Damien stepped closer until he stood just a few feet away. Your sadness, he murmured. Your strength, or fear, or hope. They call to me. That doesn't make sense. It does, he said quietly. To creatures like me. Grace shook her head. I'm just a single mother trying to survive. There is nothing special about me. Damien's gaze darkened. You are wrong. Grace felt heat crawl up her neck. He continued, voice low and deep. You face life alone with no help, and you still move forward. Most humans break with far less. Grace blinked fast, fighting tears. He saw them and took another step toward her. You are not weak, Grace Turner. Even the way he said her name felt like a promise. Grace whispered, "Why do you care so much?" Damien hesitated for the first time. "I do not know," he admitted. "And that troubles me." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. He didn't. His cold fingertips brushed her cheek. Grace inhaled sharply. Her skin tingled. Her heart thundered. Damien's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your tears burn me." Grace blinked. "They what?" He looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You are more dangerous to me than I am to you." Grace didn't understand. Didn't know how to understand. But she knew one thing. There was something growing between them. Something forbidden. Something terrifying. Something she couldn't stop. She stepped back, overwhelmed. Damien lowered his hand. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You are tired." "How do you know that?" "You breathe differently when you are exhausted." Grace's heart skipped. "You're still watching me." "Yes. Why can't you stop?" Damien met her gaze with full honesty. "Because your soul has already touched mine." Grace felt her knees weaken. "Damien, I don't know what you want from me." He stepped back into the shadows. "I want nothing," he said, "except to make sure you live." And with the faintest echo of cold air, he vanished again. Grace stood alone, shaking, breathless. But she knew one thing with painful clarity. She wasn't just surviving anymore. Something had changed. And Damien was the reason. The next evening, Grace was sitting with Oliver, helping him color a picture. She tried to pretend everything was normal. But her mind kept drifting. To Damien. His words. His touch. His confession. "Mummy," Oliver said, tugging her sleeve. "You're not coloring inside the lines." Grace blinked and laughed softly. "Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'm a bit distracted." Oliver poked her cheek. "You look like you're thinking about a boy." Grace almost choked on her breath. "A b-boy?" "Well, not at all." Oliver grinned. "Mummy has a boyfriend." Grace covered her face dramatically. "No, I do not." Oliver laughed and ran off, leaving Grace flustered. She whispered to herself, "He's definitely not my boyfriend. He's not even human." Still, she couldn't stop feeling that strange pull toward Damien. Something she shouldn't feel. Something impossible. The night grew deeper. The wind colder. When Oliver fell asleep, Grace stepped onto her small balcony to breathe. She hadn't expected what came next. A faint rustle behind her. Soft breath of cold air. Familiar energy. She turned slowly. Damien stood in the corner of the balcony, half shadow, half moonlight, watching her silently. Grace pressed her hand to her heart. You need to stop appearing like that." Damien tilted his head slightly. "Would you rather I knock?" "Yes." He looked genuinely confused. "But that would wake your child." Grace blinked. "Oh." He stepped closer. "You are troubled." "I'm overwhelmed," she admitted. "With me." Grace felt heat rush to her face. "Yes." Damien's brows drew together slightly. "Do I frighten you?" She swallowed. "A little." "Do I harm you?" "No." "Do you wish me gone?" Grace hesitated. Her heart knew the truth before her mouth could speak. "No," she whispered. Damien's eyes flickered with relief. But before he could step closer, Grace suddenly felt a cold gust of wind behind her. Too cold. Too sharp. Won't. Damien's expression changed instantly. His eyes went from soft to lethal. He moved so fast she didn't see it, only heard him snarl. "Stay behind me." Grace gasped as a shadow separated from the darkness near her kitchen window. Figure. In. Eyes glowing red. Another vampire. The intruder hissed. "Damien Cross. You break your own laws?" Damien growled. "Do not speak her name." Grace trembled behind him. Her fingers clutched the back of his coat. The intruder sneered. "An alpha. Protecting a human. Pathetic." Damien's voice dropped into a deadly tone Grace had never heard before. You entered her home. You threatened her child. The intruder stepped closer. What will you do, Damien? Kill me? Yes. Before Grace could blink, Damien lunged. The apartment filled with blur-fast movement, wind, snarls, the crash of furniture. Grace shielded her head, trembling as two immortal creatures fought around her. In less than 10 seconds, Damien slammed the intruder against the wall, fangs bared. The intruder choked out. She will ruin you, Damien. Damien's voice shook with rage. She is the only thing keeping me alive. Then, a single tear fell down Grace's cheek. And Damien felt it. He froze. His grip tightened. His eyes glowed brighter. Grace whispered, Damien, stop. At her voice, something snapped inside him. Not anger but obedience. His fingers loosened. The intruder tried to run. Damien didn't allow it. He moved behind him with impossible speed. And in one swift motion, the intruder was gone. Silence. Grace stared, breath-shaking. Damien turned to her slowly. His eyes still glowed, but his expression was softer. I am sorry, he whispered. You should not have seen that. Grace stepped back, hand over her mouth. You killed him. He came to kill you, Damien said quietly. And Oliver. Grace gasped, covering her heart. That monster. He was not the first, Damien cut in. And he will not be the last. Grace stared at him in disbelief. Why? She whispered. Why would other vampires attack me? Damien hesitated. Then he said the one thing she wasn't ready to hear. Because of me. Grace shook her head. I don't understand. Damien stepped toward her, slowly, cautiously, like approaching something fragile. There is something happening between us, he said softly. Something ancient. Something forbidden. Grace swallowed hard. Damien, what is happening? He lifted his hand, slower this time, and gently touched her cheek again. You are becoming my bond. Grace whispered. Bond? Damien nodded, eyes softening with something that looked frighteningly close to longing. My heart, what is left of it, is choosing you. Grace's breath hitched. Damien, I'm just human. I can't be chosen by someone like you. You already are. Grace trembled. But the danger. I will face all of it, Damien said, voice firm, steady. For you. Her heart ached. For him. For herself. For a love she hadn't even asked for. Grace whispered. I don't know what to do. Damien leaned closer until his forehead almost touched hers. You don't need to do anything, he murmured. Just live. And for the first time, Grace didn't feel alone. Not with him standing there, breathing in her fear, her strength, her heartbeat like it was the only thing anchoring him to this world. Grace had spent most of her life pretending to be strong, pretending she wasn't hurting, pretending she wasn't tired. But that night, all the pretending broke. The apartment was quiet. Oliver had fallen asleep on the couch, holding his toy dinosaur. The light from the TV flickered against the walls, giving the silent room a soft glow. Grace stood in the kitchen, staring at the stack of bills on the table. Rent, electricity, hospital fees from when Oliver had gotten sick months ago. She hadn't touched any of them yet. She didn't have the courage. Her hands shook as she picked up the papers. She whispered, How am I supposed to do this alone? She didn't know Damien had come in through the balcony, silently like he always did. He never scared her on purpose, but he never liked knocking either. He said doors were human things. He stood there watching her, hidden in the shadows as her shoulders trembled. She didn't cry often, but tonight she broke. A soft sob escaped her. Damien stepped forward. Grace. She turned sharply, wiping her tears with her sleeve. You scared me, she said, almost breathless. His eyes glowed faintly crimson, reacting to her sadness. I apologize. I didn't mean to frighten you. He sniffed. It's fine. I just have too much going on. Damien looked at the table, at the bills, at her trembling hands. He didn't breathe, he didn't need to, but if he did, he would have inhaled every emotion she carried. Tell me what hurts, he said softly. It's everything, she whispered. Being alone, being tired, being scared all the time. Oliver deserves more than this. He deserves more than me. Damien moved closer until he stood right in front of her. His presence was overwhelming but somehow comforting. He touched nothing, he just waited. Grace's chest shook with another silent sob. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. Damien finally reached out. His cold hand brushed her cheek. The moment his fingers touched her, she froze. She didn't expect tenderness from someone who could kill with a single movement. But his touch was gentle. Almost afraid. A tear rolled down her cheek. Damien's eyes followed it like it was something holy. Without thinking, or maybe without stopping himself, he lifted his hand and caught the tear with his thumb. It shimmered on his skin like a drop of light. Then he made a mistake. He lifted the tear to his lips. Grace gasped. What are you doing? But Damien wasn't listening. He tasted the tear. The reaction was immediate. His body shuddered. His eyes flared bright red. His lips parted in shock. Grace, he whispered. Your tears burn. What does that mean? She asked, frightened. Damien stepped back, gripping his chest. His voice was strained. It means, you are not just anyone to me. Grace stared, confused. Damien, what are you talking about? He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not cold, not harsh, not emotionless. He looked devastated. Grace Turner, he said slowly. I am imprinting on you. She blinked. Imprinting. Like an animal. No, he shook his head. Much more dangerous. He walked away, pacing like a caged creature. When a vampire imprints, he explained, he forms a bond with the person whose emotions affect him the deepest. Their sadness, their joy, their fear. Everything becomes tied to his existence. The bond is permanent, fatal if broken. Grace's mouth dropped open. So what does that mean for us? Damien swallowed hard, an action he rarely made. It means I cannot bear your pain. He paused. And I cannot live if you die. Grace felt her heart twist painfully. Damien, I never asked for that. I know. His voice cracked. That's why it scares me. She stepped toward him slowly. Look at me. He obeyed. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, looked almost human, filled with fear, confusion, and something far deeper than attraction. I didn't want you to imprint on me, she whispered. But I'm glad I'm not facing life alone anymore. Damien's jaw tightened. You could have anyone. Someone human. Someone who can give you a normal life. But you're the one who saved me, she said softly. And you're the one who keeps coming back. For a long moment they simply stood there, breathing each other's silence. Then Damien said in a voice that sounded centuries old, You don't understand the power you hold over me. Grace touched his hand. And you don't understand how long I've wished for someone to care. That night nothing romantic happened. No kiss. No confession. Just two broken souls finding comfort in each other's presence. Grace fell asleep on the couch beside Oliver. Damien sat on the floor in front of her like a guard dog, watching over them both. For the first time in 500 years, he did not feel empty. He felt alive. Damien didn't tell Grace everything. He didn't tell her that the vampire world had rules, strict ones. He didn't tell her that human attachments were forbidden. He didn't tell her that imprinting on a human was seen as a threat. But the council already knew. He smelled them before he saw them, ancient shadows dripping with power. It was nearly dawn when he sensed them gathering in the woods behind Grace's building. He moved silently through the trees, the wind shifting coldly as the figures emerged. 5 hooded vampires stepped forward. Their presence alone was enough to make the birds flee. The one in the center, a tall vampire with white hair and golden eyes, spoke first. Damien Cross, Alpha of the Northern Line. You have been summoned. Damien folded his arms. I am busy. You have broken our law, the white-haired vampire said. You have imprinted on a human. Damien didn't deny it. The vampire beside the leader sneered. Pathetic. 5 centuries of strength ruined by a mortal woman. Damien growled, a sound deep and lethal. Do not speak of her. Then you admit it? The leader asked. Yes, Damien said. And I do not regret it. The vampires exchanged looks. The council demands you sever the bond, the leader said coldly. Tonight. Damien stood very still. Impossible. You will break the bond, the leader repeated. If you don't, the human woman and her child will be eliminated. Damien's vision turned blood-red. He moved so fast the vampires barely saw him. In a single second, Damien had the leader by the throat, slammed against a tree. You will not touch Grace, Damien snarled. Nor Oliver. I swear it on my blood. The other vampires circled, their fangs out. The leader smirked, even with Damien's hand crushing his throat. You care too much, Damien. That alone is your weakness. Damien squeezed harder. Say her name again. I dare you. Another vampire stepped forward. If you refuse the council, you will be declared rogue. And hunted, another added. Damien dropped the leader, who fell to the ground coughing. Damien stood tall, his power shaking the forest. I do not fear death. But do you fear theirs? The leader countered. Damien froze. That was the one threat he couldn't ignore. Grace, Oliver, his tiny new family. The only warmth he had felt in centuries. He clenched his jaw. What does the council want from me? Distance, the leader said. Obedience. Control. You expect me to abandon them. Damien growled. You expect to keep them? The vampire asked, laughing. She is human. Weak. Mortal. She is mine. Damien's voice shook the trees. A deadly silence followed. The leader wiped his neck and stepped forward. Then prepare yourself. He leaned in. The council will decide if they live. Not you. They vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Damien stood there alone, fists clenched so tight his knuckles cracked. He returned to the apartment just as the sun began to rise. Grace was still asleep on the couch beside Oliver. He watched her chest rise and fall softly. He watched the way her arm was wrapped protectively around her son. He listened to Oliver's tiny breaths. A fragile human family. His family. And danger was coming for them. Grace opened her eyes slowly, rubbing her face. Oh, you stayed all night again. Damien forced a neutral expression. I don't sleep. Still, thank you, she whispered. He stared at her. He thought about telling her everything, the rules, the council, the threat. But instead he said, Grace, if something happens, if things get dangerous. She sat up fully. Damien, what's wrong? He swallowed. Would you trust me? She didn't hesitate. Yes. He looked at her for a long time. At her soft eyes. Her tired smile. Her fragile strength. He felt something shift inside him. Something terrifying and beautiful. I will protect you, he said quietly. No matter what I have to do. She placed her hand over his. You already do. And for the first time in Damien's immortal life, he was afraid. Not of death. Not of the council. Not of the ancient laws. He was afraid of losing her. Grace didn't know why Damien looked so tense that morning. His jaw was tight, his movements sharper than usual, and his eyes carried a strange heaviness, something she had never seen in him before. Damien, she said softly as she stood in the kitchen doorway. Are you okay? He didn't answer immediately. He stared out the window, watching the sky grow darker even though sunrise had just passed. Finally he spoke. We need to leave. Grace blinked. Leave? Go where? You and Oliver cannot stay here anymore. Grace's heart jumped. Why? Damien, what's going on? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she could tell this wasn't about something small. It wasn't about bills or danger from humans or anything normal. This was bigger, much bigger. She took a step toward him. Damien, is someone after us? Yes, he whispered. Why? Because of you. His silence was her answer. Grace swallowed. So staying with you puts me and Oliver in danger? No, Damien said sharply, stepping closer. Leaving me puts you in danger. Staying with me is the only thing that keeps you safe. Grace felt her fear rise like cold water creeping up her legs. But when she looked into Damien's eyes that had stared down death for hundreds of years, she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Damien Cross was afraid. Tell me the truth, she begged. I deserve to know. Damien let out a slow breath. The council knows about you. They know about the imprint. They will not allow me to love a human. The word love slipped out before he realized. Grace's heart jumped. Love, she whispered. Damien didn't correct himself. He didn't look away. He let the word hang between them like something fragile and powerful. She realized then that whatever was happening, whatever danger was coming, Damien cared too much to lie. What do they want? She asked. They want me to break the bond, he said, voice cold. And if I refuse, they will kill you. Grace's breath stopped. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't step away. Instead, she whispered, Then you can't leave us. Damien's expression broke, cracked open with emotion he didn't know how to hide. You should be running from me, he said quietly. Not trusting me. Grace shook her head. I trust you more than anyone I've ever met. And there it was, the truth. Damien closed the distance between them in one smooth movement, but he didn't touch her. He stopped inches away, studying her face like he was memorizing it. Then come with me, he murmured. To my home. A place the council cannot enter. Grace thought of Oliver sleeping on the couch. He'd have to come too. Damien softened. Of course. Oliver is under my protection. Grace nodded slowly. Then take us. Damien didn't waste another second. Within minutes, Grace had packed a small bag of essentials. Damien lifted Oliver gently in his arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake, and Grace followed him out into the night. The mansion. They traveled in silence, Damien moving faster than any human could drive. Grace clung to him, her cheek pressed against his chest, Oliver secure in his arms. When the world finally slowed, they were standing before a massive ancient mansion hidden deep within a forest. Its dark stone walls were covered in vines, and tall iron gates guarded the entrance. It was beautiful in a haunting way. Damien, Grace whispered, this place is enormous. It used to hold dozens of vampires, he said quietly. Now it holds only me. That sadness again. Grace felt it like a weight. Inside, the mansion was colder, quieter, almost echoing. Large portraits lined the walls, old, cracked paintings of people with pale skin and sharp eyes. Your family? She asked gently. No, he replied. My enemies. She didn't know whether to laugh or be scared. They entered a long hallway. Grace saw doors that had been locked for centuries, rooms filled with dusty furniture, and tall windows covered with heavy curtains. Living alone here must be hard, Grace whispered. It was, Damien said, his voice low. Until you. Grace froze at those words. He kept walking, unaware of how her heart suddenly warmed. When they finally reached a smaller room lit by a fireplace, Damien set Oliver gently on a bed and pulled a blanket over him. Grace watched him, the way he tucked the blanket in, the way he brushed Oliver's hair from his face. You'd make a good father, she murmured without thinking. Damien stiffened, surprised. No vampire has ever been called that. Well, get used to it, she whispered with a tiny smile. He stared at her, something soft flickering in his eyes. Grace looked around, taking in the warm glow of the fireplace. This room feels different from the others. It was my mother's, Damien said quietly. The only room I kept as it was. Grace's breath caught. His mother. Before she could ask anything more, Damien stepped closer, his face inches from hers. Grace, he said softly, there is something else you should know. Her heart pounded. What is it? He hesitated, then whispered. When I am near you, I feel things I have not felt since I was human. Grace didn't know whether to speak or just breathe. Damien lifted a hand to her cheek slowly, giving her time to pull away. He didn't. His fingers brushed her skin gently. Your presence, he whispered, is waking a part of me that was dead for centuries. Grace swallowed hard. Damien, I feel something too. He looked at her lips. Grace, he murmured, if I kiss you, I won't be able to stop. The imprint will deepen. She stepped closer. Then kiss me. Damien's restraint snapped. He cupped her face gently but with a hunger beneath the surface, a hunger he had been fighting for nights. He leaned down and pressed his lips against hers. It was soft at first, low, warm, electric, but then the bond surged through them, like fire and ice and light all at once, and Damien pulled her closer, deepening the kiss as if he had waited centuries for it. Grace held onto him tightly, her fingers gripping his shirt. For the first time since she'd met him, Damien trembled. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Damien rested his forehead against hers. You don't know what you've done, he whispered. Grace smiled gently. I think I do. The peaceful moment didn't last. The mansion's walls suddenly trembled. Cold wind rushed through the hallway. The fire flickered violently. Damien's eyes snapped open, turning crimson. No, he whispered. They found us. Grace's blood ran cold. The council. Damien didn't answer. He grabbed her hand and pushed her behind him. Shadows moved across the door. Crash. The front door of the mansion exploded inward. 5 hooded vampires stepped inside. The same ones from the forest. The leader smirked. Damien, you should have listened. Damien growled, fangs out, eyes burning bright red. You should have stayed away. Grace grabbed Oliver from the bed, holding him tightly. The leader pointed at her. Kill the woman. Kill the child. Break the bond. Grace gasped. Oliver cried out. Damien roared, a roar so deep and powerful it shook the entire mansion. He launched at the nearest vampire, moving so fast he was a blur. In seconds, blood sprayed across the walls. The vampire collapsed, head twisted at an impossible angle. 2 others rushed him. Grace screamed, Damien! He fought like a storm, centuries of strength unleashed at once. But the council members were strong, ancient, and relentless. Grace! Damien shouted. Stay back! One vampire broke past Damien and leaped toward Grace and Oliver. Grace shielded her son, bracing for death. But Damien slammed into the attacker, tackling him into a wall so hard the stone cracked. Another vampire grabbed Damien from behind, stabbing him with a silver blade. Ah! Damien roared, falling to his knees. Grace cried out, rushing toward him. No, Damien! The leader smiled wickedly. The bond will die with him. He raised his hand, forming a dark, crackling energy, something ancient and deadly. Grace didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She stepped in front of Damien, arms spread wide. Stay away from him, she screamed. The leader laughed. You would die for him. Yes, Grace cried, tears streaming down her face. Because he saved my life. 'Cause he saved my son. 'Cause he loves us. And because Her voice broke. I love him. Damien froze. Those words, those impossible beautiful words, filled his dying senses. Grace's tears fell onto his face. One tear landed on his lips. And everything changed. A surge of power ripped through Damien. Burning, blazing, unstoppable. The imprint ignited fully. Damien rose to his feet slowly, eyes glowing brighter than ever. His wounds healed instantly. The leader stumbled back, terrified. That's impossible. A human tear cannot. Damien's voice thundered. Her love strengthens me. He blurred forward, faster than any vampire in the room. One by one, he killed the council members. Swift, brutal, and merciless. The last vampire fell to the floor, lifeless. The mansion fell silent. Grace sank to her knees, trembling, Oliver clinging to her. Damien rushed to her, kneeling in front of her. "Grace," he whispered urgently, cupping her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears still falling. You almost died. But you saved me," he said softly. He touched her cheek again, thumb brushing away her tears. "These," he whispered, "are my strength." Grace leaned into his hand. "Damien." "Meant it. I love you." Damien closed his eyes for a moment, like her words were something too precious to bear. When he opened them, they were warm. No red, no hunger, just love. "I have lived over 500 years, he murmured. "And in all that time I have never loved anything. Not until you." Grace felt her heart break and heal at once. Damien pulled her against him gently, holding her like something sacred. Oliver tugged on Damien's sleeve. "Are you okay?" the little boy whispered. Damien smiled softly, the kind of smile that made him look almost human. "I am now," he said, placing a protective hand on Oliver's head. For the first time they were safe. For the first time, Damien had something worth living for, and something he would kill for. And for the first time, Grace realized. The night she almost ended her life was the night her real life began. If you're hooked on this story and want to see what happens next, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated. Share this with anyone who loves dark, thrilling romance because things are just getting started. And if you think love like this could survive in the real world, leave me a comment below. I can't wait to hear what you think. See you in the next chapter. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.